And now we turn to Kelly's Court. We have a lot to get to, so let's just do it. We've got the OGs of Kelly's Court way back when it used to be Kendall's Court. These guys were making this segment a star. Arthur Aidala, trial attorney and managing partner at Aidala, Bertuna and Cayman's PC, and host of Arthur Aidala Power Hour. And Mark Eiglarsh, criminal defense attorney at Eiglarsh Law, which you can find at speaktomark.com. Welcome back, guys. Honestly, here's a scary fact for you. We've been at this together for 20 years.
What?
Do you guys? Yes. Yes, we started way back when I was a correspondent in the DC Bureau of Fox. That was 2004. 19 at least. But at least we are about to be hitting our 20-year anniversary. Can you believe that, guys?
Nice.
Yeah, I was. I think it was October of '04. It was one of my first Fox News appearances. My first one was actually with Shep and who's the wife of the NFL commissioner?
Jane
Skinner.
Skinnerville. Yes,
Jane,
yes.
Wonderful.
Oh, well, you couldn't have picked two nicer people. Then you wandered over to Kelly's Court and you were like, what the hell is this? Kendall's back then. Kendall.
It was Kendall's Court. It wasn't Kelly's Court. It was Kendall's Court.
At a minimum,
first
I made a wonderful...
You were referring of the Supreme Court on Supreme Court decisions at time, correct?
That's right.
I've made a wonderful friend in Arthur over the years. It's been great.
I take no offense that you didn't mention me in that.
But you and me, come on, we're tight, Megyn. We're good.
Of course. We're always, partied Miami. All right, so here is, I guess, I don't even know where to start, so I guess we'll start with the thing most in the news, which is Diddy. But we've got Peterson to go through. We got Menendez, Garth Brooks. So Diddy, the biggest headline out of his case is he's getting a new judge. A new federal judge has been assigned to his case, sex trafficking and conspiracy and racketeering against him. And what's interesting about it is, according to the reports, that will allow him a third bite at the apple of trying to get bail, which has been denied by the first two federal judges overseeing his case. And man, he's fighting hard to get bail, insisting that he's no flight risk and that he's not a threat to the witnesses. Like, the other judges seem convinced he might actually try to intimidate a witness, which really led them to say, you're not going anywhere. I think everybody's watching this because if he gets out, who knows what he'll do. Mark, should he get bail?
No. In fact, the prosecutors are going to simply say, you're judge shopping. What changed since the last time, right? A judge made a ruling. What change in circumstances occurred since the judge found that there was no possible way that he would somehow return to court if bail was ordered? So I think it's a real easy argument for prosecutors. Nothing has changed except the judge.
I know that that's often the case, Mark, but I think this is the appeal that's being filed is an abuse of discretion. So what you're saying is that because just to make that clear, he's appealing the denial of bail by the earlier judges and will appeal to this third judge to give him bail. Go ahead, Arthur. And so it's not that typically when Mark and I are in state court and you're going from one judge to another, you have to show that something has changed, a witness disappeared or he didn't get indicted or something like that, and you want the bail to be lowered. But here you're just saying, listen, this judge did not weigh the factors appropriately. I respectfully disagree with my brother, Mark. We're talking about $50 million, and that's a lot of money for anyone. But besides that, so let's just say for him, it's not a lot of money. He's wearing an ankle bracelet with GPS. He volunteered to pay for his own security, who would report directly to the United States Marshals and to the U.S. Attorney's Office if he left his house for any reason except an authorized trip to the doctors or to his lawyers. So he's basically saying, let's just make my house my prison. And they were willing to do anything, Megyn, in terms of giving up his phone, giving up access to technology, just like let him sleep in his own bed in his own room. He is still innocent until proven guilty.
Why should he get? They all want to stay in their own house. Why should he get it?
Because we're all innocent until proven guilty.
Well, and lots of people get that same presumption, but they don't get bail.
Arthur's argument.
Since March, he's known they were coming after him. Since March, he had the financial resources to say, hey, I'm going to Google what places are not extraditable. I'm going to go hang out with Roman Polanski in France, and I'm going to live the rest of my life there.
But they're not just worried, Mark, about him fleeing. They're worried about witness intimidation.
Tampering. Of course. So Arthur makes a compelling argument. It's the same one I make in federal court repeatedly. In this particular case, you have a history of alleged witness tampering. If he's at home, no one's recording the conversations like they would be if he's in a jail. So it's something that can continue to take place. And secondly, I do not believe that any judge abuses their discretion in this particular case if they make a finding that no bail is to be ordered. I think that it's not an abuse of discretion.
He's got, a history of violence that we can see on tape with one of the witnesses, we believe, in this case, his ex-girlfriend. He's accused of throwing a Molotov cocktail in the car of some rapper he thought was flirting with his girlfriend or more. This guy is not afraid of hurting people he thinks are betraying him. And so I think these judges have very good reason to think he might intimidate somebody. Here's what his lawyers are saying, though, Arthur. They're saying he will agree to live under highly restricted conditions with no phones, no access to the internet, and video monitoring if necessary. The previous judge said he could still operate through employees, quote, through even coded messages if necessary. And in the appeal, the lawyers say there's no evidence that he used coded messages. But you can see these judges don't trust this guy not to do something.
Yeah, but the bottom line is they're making it so difficult for him to do something, number one. And you know who his cellmate is right now, right? It's all over the materials you said. And what happened to him? He was allowed out, and then he called one of the witnesses. I don't even think it was an intimidation. He just called him, and the judge took away his bail, and he's been in the MDC since. So it's not like Sean Combs doesn't realize what will happen if he is let out and then picks up the phone and tries to intimidate a witness. He'll wind up right where he is.
With all due respect, this guy, Sean Combs, is now, his name is being mentioned in connection with not just physical harm to others, but possible murder. That was not the case for Sam Bankman-Fried, the nerdy, altruistic, philanthropic, whatever, who stole a bunch of money. Sean Combs is alleged to be very dangerous. And
Megyn,
not only a serial rapist,
he's not serial.
Yes, not yet charged, but you've got a civil attorney who's going to bring, he says he's got 120 plaintiffs who are going to allege that they were sexually assaulted or raped by Sean Combs. He denies it. But you also have Tupac Shakur's family hiring heavy-hitting legal teams to now take a very serious look at whether he was involved in Tupac's death. And the guy who's accused of being the shooter is saying that that's a possibility. I don't exactly know what he said, but he said something like he offered to pay him $1 million to do it. These are all allegations Sean Combs denies. But my point is these judges have no reason to say, yeah, he'll be fine. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. So, Megyn, let me give you a little pushback on that. I'm okay in deciding and declaring that with what they've got, with what he's accused of, and the potential risk of flight, danger to the community, and the other things, there's no abuse of discretion holding him no bond. But you start bringing in all this other stuff. They are mere allegations. At the end of the week, they may say he was OJ's partner in the slaughter of his ex-wife. Everybody piles on. We all know, having done this for close to 20 years, of all the money grabs, right? And I'm not saying a lot of money grabs. It's not a scenario where people now feel more comfortable coming and telling their truth, but it's also a scenario where they know this guy's circling down the toilet. He's still got money and people want to cash in. So
fair enough.
I don't know about this linking him to murders. That shouldn't be considered right now. What should be considered is what the court.
The Tupac thing is interesting. I grant you this one attorney who's got 120 plaintiffs, but by the way, they include a 9-year-old boy, which is very disturbing. We don't know whether it's true, and he's a very rich man. And yes, it is true that probably some portion of those people see an opportunity to, like you say, engage in a money grab. I doubt all of them are in that boat. I just have a difficult time believing that, given what we know from, the tapes and so on he was into. But on the Tupac thing, it's interesting, Arthur. They say, this is reporting now that the family of Tupac has hired powerhouse lawyer Alex Spiro. This is according to Rolling Stones. Spiro to investigate any potential links between Sean Combs and the murder of Tupac Shakur. The news follows reports that the late Los Angeles rapper's family have hired a team of investigators to ascertain if the Bad Boy Entertainment founder, meaning Combs, had any involvement in Tupac's death. During the height of the East Coast, West Coast hip-hop feud, a 25-year-old Shakur was gunned down in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas, September 96. His murder has gone unsolved, but a break in the cold case came in September of 23 when Compton, the Crips gang member Dwayne Keith Davis, was arrested and charged with Shakur's murder. Davis, who heads to trial this March, has made claims that Combs offered him $1 million for a hit on Shakur. This is actually quite interesting. And I don't know how you prove a murder, this many years out and take this guy who's been, charged with the murder, Arthur, take his word for it.
Yeah, well, you can't, and at least in the state of New York, co-conspirators' statements cannot be the only basis for charging someone with a crime. So he would be a co-conspirator with Sean Combs. If that's the only evidence they have, Sean could not be tried, number one. Number two, in terms of a money grab, and I believe you used that term, Megyn, remember Puffy went on trial here in New York, 20 years ago, something along those lines. My dad represented Jennifer Lopez in that case. And my dad's whole thing was, his direction was keep her off the stand, which he did. But I was there for the closing arguments, and Johnny Cochran was there, and Ben Brafman was there, and I was with Sean Combs. There were, I want to say, and don't hold me to this, $800 million in lawsuits against Sean Combs from that incident that took place. So, and that was 20 years ago when $800 million meant something. So I agree with you, Megyn, that there may be a portion of this, a percentage of this where there's some truth to it. But I would also say, once those sheep start coming in and how much are you suing for? How much are you suing for? And these are not very sophisticated people. Let's face it. They're people who hang out at 3 a.m. in these sex raves. Sean's lawyer, Mark Eiglarsh, who's an excellent attorney, has been on the air saying he's spoken to, I think, 15 people who are supposed to be witnesses on this trial, and a lawyer's allowed to do his own investigation. It's not just the government. And not one of them said, was there any degree of force used? There was a party, there were drugs, there was alcohol, there was prostitution, but everyone was there according to their will. No one was forced to participate or partake.
But do you need that? I mean, honestly, if you've got a tape of a woman passed out and unconscious, and or a man, and you've got P. Diddy having sex with that person, he's toast.
That's different. Well, that is different, but that's not what's being alleged. It looks like what Arthur was saying is the best path to defense's freedom in this case, and that is, no, all these people were voluntarily participating, albeit arguably immoral and outrageous conduct, but that's not what he's accused of. It is forcing these people to engage in acts through physical contact, physical threats and assault.
Yep.
And listen, that comes down to great cross-examination of these witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the allegations, and I'm sure you can appreciate this because of your status in our society, that because of his fame and his power in that industry, they felt coerced. If they didn't do this, they weren't going to be a star. If they didn't do that, he wasn't going to sign them to a record label. And I'm sure that we all know people who have been confronted with that situation, and they've told whoever confronted them, great, I won't sign with your record label. Bye-bye. And then there's other people who say, all right, I'll acquiesce and you make me a star. And then when they're not a star, that's when the accusations come out.
Yeah. Right. Well, you know about that because I think that's the position some of those women were in with Harvey. Not all, but at least some, I mean, I've spoken with women who turned on their heel as soon as Harvey was like, come on into my hotel room. And they were like, peace out, brother. And then there were others who willingly went in there knowing exactly what was going to follow and only later decided that it was something that was non-consensual. But I also know some non-consenting victims of his. Arthur would disagree. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say that both Arthur and I, having done criminal defense work for so long, we deal with so many alleged victims where regret turns to rape, right?
Yep.
It's
regret isn't the same as no consent.
Correct. It's not the same.
Yeah, and they're going to flesh all that out.
Yeah.
It's in all aspects of society. And Megyn, in my firm here, where we're seeing it the most, and it's terrifying because we all have kids around this age, is in the colleges, where a young woman does something with a young man, and then a week later, a month later, or a year later, out of nowhere, it wasn't a consensual act. And now I have a young man on the other side of my desk with his mother and father. They're all absolutely distraught. I had a kid thrown out of college, by the college, only to have the court. And an Article 78 proceeding, which is when you go to the court and say the school is wrong, returns it. Says there was no evidence that this kid did anything wrong. But where does he go to get his 2 years of life back that he got thrown out of college? And then they accept him back into college, only for him to be ostracized. This whole thing, no disrespect about believe all women, it's insane.
No, there should be disrespect around believe all women. It's ridiculous. No, I agree with you. By the way, Article 78 proceedings, surprise question on my bar exam. It was like, what's that doing there? What? And very tricky. In any event, I agree with you that there may be holes in this case to some extent, but I think there's, as far as whether this is a guy who violated the law, I don't think they're going to have any trouble proving that with the amount of drugs that were on site. Apparently there may have been illegal guns on site. And if they've got any person on cam passed out or in some sort of a state who's engaged in a sex act with Sean Combs, he's toast. The complaint, the indictment will be amended. And I'm sure they've seen it all right now. This is making do we have this? Yeah, look at this. This is a film he put out, a video he put out. It's a DJ who was at one of his big parties. And look at how, just nonplussed he is, that this person is unconscious. Watch.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, for all those in London that don't know what happens to the white man when he comes to a P. Diddy party, this is what happens to the white man.
It's so unfortunate.
You gotta pull back though, so they can see. That's crazy. Matt, move out the way. You're still alive. Look at that. Look. Would you?
With a drink on his head.
And that's James from Simeon Mobile Disco. He is a actual DJs aren't supposed to pass out, but when they come to one of my parties, this is what happens to him. I put him to sleep.
Oh, really?
Right?
You put the drink on his head.
Okay.
Megyn, that doesn't.
Megyn, when did you become a Puritan? Are you kidding me, Megyn Kelly? When did you become a Puritan?
That guy's unconscious.
I've never been to a party where someone's
That guy drank a lot. At a P. Diddy party, which is what people do. There's no surprise there.
I don't know, guys. Look,
Labor Day weekend.
That's one thing. But you're telling me there's not going to be any video of a woman in that condition having relations with a man? Bullshit. I'll make you both. I'll make you $1,000 bet right now. I'll bet both of you $1,000. There will be.
They better have it, because let me tell you something. The word of cinnamon, amber, fallopian, toiletta ain't going to carry the day. I'll tell you that right now.
And there's videotapes. It's all over the Post and other papers today. There are at least 3 A-list celebrities who are on camera having sex allegedly with Diddy, and then another tape of some celebrity whose celebrity dwarfs everybody else's celebrity, who's also on camera having sex, not with Diddy, but with somebody. If he's taking videotapes of A-list celebrities, he's definitely filming the lower, lesser-known sex-trafficked girls he allegedly brought over for these parties. And I guarantee it was not all, I am awake, I am consenting, I am here by my own will to have sex with these 40 strangers.
But you got to look at what he's charged with in the indictment. Now, you mentioned amending the indictment.
Sex trafficking.
Superseding the indictment. Now, there may be a superseding indictment that comes down and adds more charges. That's a different story. But as of right now, the sex trafficking, passed out DJ, that's not admissible. And some
I know this is anecdotal on a podcast. Hello, I'm not trying to admit an evidence. All right, we got to move on because there's so many other things we got to get to. But the bottom line is, Diddy could get off, but he's probably not going to get bail, and to be continued on whether they add charges to the indictment. All right, let's talk about Garth Brooks for a minute. I mean, I don't want to start this with speaking of money grab, but this one.
Thank you.
All right, I don't. So he's being accused of rape, not in a criminal court, not by the police, not by a DA, but by a woman in a civil lawsuit against him who says she worked as a hair and makeup stylist for him from 2017 to 2020, that he allegedly harassed her. She describes graphic sexual fantasies, reading from the New York Times, and in one instance allegedly placed her hands on his erect unit when he came out of the shower. In a statement he provided on Thursday night, he said for the last 2 months, he's been hassled to no end with threats, lies, and tragic tales of what my future would be if I did not write a check for many millions of dollars to this person. Hush money, no matter how much or how little, is still hush money. In my mind, that means I'm admitting to behavior I'm incapable of, ugly acts no human should ever do to another. And this woman, you know, the problem for her is going to be that after the alleged rape, because then she said he actually raped her, she went on working for him for years, right. Mark.
That's the biggest problem right there. You said it. Doesn't mean
great.
It didn't happen. And there are reasons why people do that. They need the money, whatever. But that's a tough sell to a jury, particularly when the bulk of the evidence is her word. What I want to see, however, are the things that don't lie. Her alleged text messages that he didn't delete. She claims some were deleted. Okay, well, there's got to be a way to get those back. But secondly, let's see what was not deleted. And does that corroborate anything that she's alleging?
Mark, 5 years ago, I would have agreed with every word you said. I really would have, until I sat there and watched what happened in the Harvey Weinstein case. Because the woman who he's doing 20 years in prison for, he the day after the alleged sexual assault, and it was not rape, the alleged sexual assault, he flew her to California to see her best friend give birth, and then a week later she flew back. And her testimony at the trial, with the jury convicted, said we had dinner together, we went to his house, and we had sex, we had intercourse, and then we continued our relationship there forward. And then years later, she said, well, that one time, that sexual assault, that was against her will. Not the other times, but that one was, and he was convicted and he's doing 20 years in jail. So we don't know what jurors do anymore with these facts.
Well, I mean, it is possible. Just because you say no, you say yes one time doesn't mean that you've given permission every other time. So that is possible. But this is weird, to be raped by your employer with whom you work very closely. Hair and makeup, their hands are all over you. I mean, that is in its own way, an intimate relationship. And then she continued doing that, like, for years after an alleged brutal rape that was so bad she claims she went to seek treatment from her OBGYN and considered suicide. Like, I don't know, guys. That's going to be a tough sell, and I would suggest that is why, Mark, there is no criminal complaint against him. There is no legal body. If this allegedly happened in 2017, we're within the statute of limitations for a rape claim. Doesn't seem like she got any bites down at the police station, if she ever even went.
Proof beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt is a very high burden. Getting money from someone in the civil arena, 51%, kind of low. And my guess is that the cops said there just isn't enough here. He probably had a great lawyer to argue on his behalf. It didn't happen. And so there's reasonable doubt. A prosecutor looked at it and said, I'm likely not going to get a conviction. And if he can show that she's shaking him down for money, you add that to the list of things that she did, including returning to intimately put makeup on his face. That doesn't mean she's lying, but it just makes it a tougher sell to a jury.
He went into a civil court first and tried to get a declaration that he didn't do this while she was trying to shake him down. I mean, whether it happened or not, but I'm trying to get him to pay. He went in and tried to keep it anonymous and get a declaration that his identity would be protected and that the woman's accusations against him were false. And then this week, it looks like she responded and argued that that lawsuit was a preemptive move to silence her. Then she filed her complaint naming him. I mean, I will say one thing, Arthur. I don't love his denial. And my Phil Houston Spy the Lie background tells me it's not a great denial, saying if I, basically hush money, saying in my mind, that means I am admitting to behavior I am incapable of. Ugly acts no human should ever do to another. That's not what you would say. You would say, I did not do this. When you start to say, I would never, I'm not capable of it. I could never rob a bank. Why would I? I have plenty of money. I wasn't raised like that. That's an ugly act. No human should do. Now you're on thin ice. That I have to tell you, my little radar went off when I read that piece of his denial. Go ahead.
Well, as you know, I represent our mutual friend, Alan Dershowitz, who was accused of a sex act. And I've been very unsuccessful in getting him to shut up about the denial.
Same.
And look, the bottom line is he admitted to me when we figured out a settlement here. And he said, I don't think I'm going to be able to keep my mouth shut but he used some of these terms like, I would never do that. Nobody should do that. She was clearly a troubled person and she was taking advantage of it. And blah, blah. I mean, he said everything under the rainbow. Do I believe every word that comes out of his mouth? I do. I don't think Alan Dershowitz had sex with this woman in 6 different places, no way, shape, or form. But his denials, I mean, I've gotten plenty of texts from people like, can't you get your client to be quiet? And I'm like, no, I can't. So I don't really judge everyone about how they deny it. But, someone said Eric Adams didn't deny his charges in the New York City as being mayor because he said, the day before the indictment came out, if I am indicted, I am innocent. I said, that's not a denial? They're like, no, that's not. He didn't say I didn't do it. He said I am. I go, come on, that's enough of a denial. But it should have been more forceful. You know what the script is on the proper denial.
I don't know. And what you're missing about Alan versus this is like there was a very clear, forceful denial by Alan as the first response. I didn't do it. I don't know this person. I've never been alone with this person. I've never had sex with this woman. And then the flowery language might follow. But his denials on her have been consistent and clear. And he sounds like a truth teller. Let me open up all my date books. Let me provide all video of anything that I can get my hands on. I'm suing everybody who says that I did do it so that I will then be subject to deposition. So I've got to tell the story under oath. I'm glad to. Alan sounded like a truth teller. I'm not saying Garth Brooks isn't. I'm just saying a little red flaggy on that statement. We'll see where this goes.
Megyn, the difference may be there may have been sexual interaction between Garth Brooks and this woman. It just wasn't rape. Alan is saying he didn't even know the person.
That's right. Different story. Okay, let's keep going because so many big cases. Menendez. These guys, they might be getting out of prison, you guys. Like, for reals. This docu-series, that's what they call them now. It's such a bullshit term. I hope the audience knows at this point, there is a difference between a documentary and a docu-series. And frankly, even the documentaries that are documentaries these days may or may not be a documentary. It's more like Ava DuVernay's view of how this case went down. So whatever, this is like a docuseries, and it's Dominic Dunn's view of what likely went on in the Menendez family. He was a famous writer for Vanity Fair, whose daughter was tragically killed, and then he became very big in the crime space. Anyway, it's a Ryan Murphy production, and it reimagines the Menendez murders. It definitely concludes that they killed their parents, which they admit to, but it also writes in an incestual relationship between the two brothers, which is a weird turn. And now, notwithstanding all that, it's back in the news, and there's a new push to let them out, to say this wasn't a fair trial. At worst, this was manslaughter, because as I understand it, I'll start with you on this one, Arthur, the whole defense, Leslie Abramson, for those who are our age, they remember her with her great curly blonde hair. For the younger generation, she was just this ball-busting lawyer who represented the younger brother, Eric. We knew they killed their parents. The question was whether there were mitigating circumstances. She went in there balls to the wall and was like, Jose Menendez was an abuser. He abused Eric. He abused Lyle. Eric is somebody who was protecting his own life. He was in fear that his father was going to kill him. And that's why this happened. And they got a hung jury for both boys on the first trial. And then they were retried, and they were both convicted and sentenced to life because her abuse defense was not allowed. It was not allowed. And so now the DA out in LA, this George Gascon, I mean, this is right on brand because he hates prosecuting crime. He hates keeping bad guys in jail. I'm not saying they necessarily deserve to stay in jail. We'll debate that, but he loves letting criminals out of jail. He has said he's reviewing new evidence, a letter, which we can describe, and that they're going to have a hearing on this new evidence this November to see whether they should get a new trial or whether he'll just reduce the charges as is from murder to manslaughter and they could just walk without a retrial. So what do you make of all this, Arthur?
The reason why we're talking about this particular case is because of the notoriety it got when it was going down. Actually, we started the show talking about our beginnings at Fox News. If I'm not mistaken, this was right around that time. I forget when the trial was. Wasn't it around
might have been
2004, somewhere in there?
Yeah.
Okay, but it was around that time. But it has become, and look, sometimes I agree with you, prosecutors are too lenient, but sometimes, and there's a case before the Supreme Court of the United States right now out of Oklahoma, where and it is a guy on death row, and this is why I don't believe in the death penalty. It is a guy on death row, and everyone from the government is asking the Supreme Court, because apparently the way the jurisdiction is, they're the only ones who could stop the execution. So I believe it's the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, the DA who tried the case, the judge who tried the case, is saying it was not that he didn't do it. Not that he didn't do it, but he didn't get a fair trial because of something similar to Menendez. Evidence that was presented shouldn't have been, or vice versa. And please don't kill this guy. Give him a new trial. And look, Netflix and popular opinion with an elected district attorney has a lot of power. And they're going back and saying, hey, these guys maybe didn't get a fair trial. And we're reading about it all day long in Brooklyn, New York, and Manhattan. Look at the Central Park Five, the kids who were doing major time for a rape in Central Park. And they threw that case out altogether. And now one of the guys is a city councilman with a big megaphone here in the city of New York. So, I mean, I'm interested to hear what my buddy Mark has to say, but
I have strong thoughts.
Not so rare anymore
Right,
that cases are being overturned.
Let us hear you. Oh, by the way, my trusty producers actually informed me that the first trial ended in 93, and then the second trial was 95. I think you and I must be thinking about Peterson.
Peterson, that's the one.
It was Peterson.
You're right.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, I have a lot to say. My wife and I have polished off that docu-series, which was just dreadful because you really don't know what the truth is. There's only 3 people who know whether sexual abuse ever really took place. One is dead, thanks to the 2 boys, and the other 2 were facing, the death sentence.
The gas chamber.
Forgive me if I don't, jump in on what they're saying. Okay, but let's just talk legal for a second. If the judge found at the time in their second trial that there wasn't sufficient evidence to allow the defense to argue that sexual abuse took place, but now newly discovered evidence, which was not available at the time, seems to suggest that there was alleged sexual abuse, then they would have been denied a fair trial at the time. So what you've got is a letter that was recently discovered, authored by a cousin, where one of the brothers, I think it was Eric, the younger one, wrote to his cousin sometime before the shooting, where he complains to the cousin.
9 months before.
There we go, 9 months before. That the father's going to come in and do it to me again, that kind of thing, suggesting, it doesn't come out and say sexual abuse, but it suggests, it's strong evidence that it might be sexual abuse.
Stand by, hold your thought. Here's what the note read, the letter. I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. I can't explain it. I never know when it's going to happen, and it's driving me crazy. Every night I stay up thinking he might come in. I need to put it out of my mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, a very reasonable inference is that that's the sexual abuse that he's talking about. The second thing is you've got an original member of Menudo who's coming forward to say that when he was 13 to 14, somewhere in there, that this guy, the father, allegedly sexually abused him as an executive for, I think it was Sony Records.
Sorry to keep interrupting you, but it flows better this way. His name is Roy Rossello. He was in a documentary about Menudo, and here is what he said on cam. We played this and talked about it at the time.
That's the man here that raped me. This guy. That's the pedophile.
How old were you there?
14 years old.
And he's pointing at Jose Menendez. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. So the prosecutor, first of all, has an obligation to look at this stuff. Everybody's making a big deal about it. All he's saying is, we'll look at it. Well, of course, that's exactly what a politician / prosecutor who seeks the truth must do. Now, he has to first discern, is this guy Menudo, is he even really picking out the right guy? Did it really happen? And get into the weeds to see if that's even true. Second thing is, what about this letter? Is it authentic? We know, we don't know. We don't know anything from that docuseries, but they allege that Lyle, at least, was going around writing letters and trying to convince people to lie on their behalf. So we know that manufacturing evidence is not beneath these guys. So is that letter authentic? Is it real? If all that's real, did the DA afford them a fair trial by arguing that the defense of sexual abuse was complete malarkey, completely manufactured? It was all about money. It was all about greed. Were they really given a fair trial? And if they weren't, whether you like these guys or not, it's not about them. It's about the system. Everybody should be given a fair trial.
Here's the thing, though. To Mark's point, Arthur, in the first Menendez trial, reading here from a Fox News report, there's the cousin who was on the receiving end of that letter from Eric 9 months before the parents were murdered. The cousin is named Andy Kano. And in the first Menendez trial, Kano testified that Eric had told him about his father's sexual abuse at age 13. So this witness did testify that there was abuse at the first trial, which resulted in a hung jury. And then the second judge did not want to entertain this defense at all. Maybe the letter wasn't available, but the witness took the stand and said the stuff that's in the letter. So is it really grounds for a new trial?
Well, in the world, I practice law, and that would not be newly discovered evidence. The letter would not be enough. In other words, they had the testimony. The testimony, if it came across as credible, I mean, as long as the guy is not a heroin addict who's falling asleep on the stand, and then the judges, look, I know that there were appeals here, and they must have looked at the appellate courts out west, and the appellate courts must have said, no, the judge in his discretion felt that in this particular trial it wasn't admissible. That's not newly discovered evidence. Newly discovered evidence is, we all know what newly discovered is, someone just popping up out of nowhere, like you were talking about in the Puffy case, and Tupac, they arrested a guy 20 years, 30 years later, and he's like, yeah, I did it, but Puffy paid me to do it.
What about the Menudo guy? Would the Menudo guy be newly discovered evidence?
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, that's different because that wasn't, yes, maybe different. But there's a whole standard. Again, it's California law, so that's why I'm hesitant. There's a whole standard about whether a defense team did their due diligence to try to unearth these things. You know, you can't say it's newly discovered evidence if it was sitting right there and you just neglected it. That's not newly discovered evidence.
The letter, Arthur, was found by someone who was looking through some old stuff and found it. So the letter wasn't available. And we do know that letter amazingly corroborates the testimony of the cousin, even though he did testify. Not having that letter, significantly hurt the defense. I'm not saying it's a new trial, but it's close.
So let's just show a little bit of what we're talking about. So it's hard to recommend this Netflix series because it is so dark. I mean, I thought it was going to be kind of like true crime and a kind of murder mystery where you know the outcome. It's like every episode is about child sexual abuse in great detail. It's dark. I was trying to watch it while I was on the treadmill. I'm like, I cannot handle this. Anyway, here's just a little bit. I'll show you the trailer. Okay, take a look at SOT 42.
Part of this process is the two of you reconnecting, growing closer as brothers.
Eric and I killed our parents together, so I'd say that makes us pretty close. Our life was one thing, and we decided we weren't going to take that anymore.
Unbelievable.
Starting right now, we're going to demand more out of life. And we are never going to fucking go back.
The acting is amazing in it. But here, what I wanted to do in showing that, just like zoom out like 30,000 feet. Kim Kardashian wrote a letter. The Innocence Project has now taken this. All right.
Isn't she a lawyer now?
She's not a lawyer. She's not a lawyer. She made $1 billion off of a sex tape and clothing that actually is quite good.
Didn't she apply to law school? There's something about
she tried to do the apprenticeship way, where you have to take like the baby bar, and she failed it. She's not a lawyer. At least not that she's publicized. She tried.
How do you really feel, Meg?
Like
Megyn, tell us how you really feel. How do you really feel?
I feel that she's a force for evil. That is how I feel. I wish she had just stayed on the sidelines, notwithstanding her very cute tops and undergarments. Okay. Having said all that, she's written a letter, Innocence Project. So 30,000-foot letter. What do you think this guy does? Like, people will look at this and say, it's been 35 years or something that they've been in jail. Like, is it time? Because as somebody wise once put it to me, when the kids kill the parents, it's the ultimate F in parenting. And so at some level, this is their fault.
I got to say one thing. I got to get something off my chest. And I don't think anybody's saying this. Let's spell this out for a second. Okay. Let's say the sexual abuse took place. And I'm not convinced of that. I have no idea. And no one really knows. People think they know. They don't know. But let's say it did, for argument's sake. Also, we know factually that this wasn't a spontaneous, oh my God, he's going to harm me again. Let me go get a shotgun right now and kill him. That they took weeks. They planned this. It met every element of premeditated murder. So you don't get to kill your parents under the law. Your mother, by the way, too, who wasn't involved in the sexual abuse, but allegedly knew of it. I'm not even convinced of that. But that you get a free pass to brutally murder your parents. The way you do get a pass is if you reasonably fear imminent death or great bodily harm. So what they said in the docuseries was, well, we thought then our parents would kill us. They assuming they even argued that. No one believes that.
They did argue that.
Yeah, that's their link, because they know you don't get to kill your parents out of retribution. It must be because you fear.
I get it, but that doesn't answer the question of what Gascon is likely to do with, the pressure of Kim Kardashian and the Innocence Project, which is taking a hard look. All right, I guess we don't know, but we'll learn more at the end of November. I have to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll do Peterson. Don't go away. This fall, stay cozy with Cozy Earth, where luxury meets comfort and every product turns your home into a sanctuary. After a busy day, it's time for relaxation, and Cozy Earth is there to help you embrace that moment, that calm. Let me tell you about the bamboo sheet set. It's made from 100% premium viscose from bamboo. They are incredibly soft and breathable, helping you sleep cooler. They get softer with every wash, and they also come with a 10-year warranty. For cozy nights in, the women's bamboo pajama set is a must. This lightweight stretch knit design sleeps cooler than cotton, keeping you just the right temperature all night. What sets Cozy Earth apart? Their commitment to quality, from responsibly sourced materials to innovative fabrics that will not pill or wear down. Plus, that 10-year warranty says it all. Ready to wrap yourself in luxury this fall? Go to CozyEarth.com/Megyn and use the code Megyn for up to 40% off. That's CozyEarth.com/Megyn. If you get a post-purchase survey, say you heard about Cozy Earth from the Megyn Kelly Show. Thank you. If you're tired of those same old coffee offerings from those mega corporations pushing their woke agendas, listen up. It's time to take a stand and support a brand that truly embodies American values, Blackout Coffee. They stand with hardworking Americans who believe in family, faith, and freedom. They roast some of the most incredible coffee you will ever taste using only premium grade beans, roasted and shipped to you within 48 hours. And for the cold brew fans, Blackout Coffee is excited to announce the launch of their new 2 ready-to-drink cold brew coffee latte options. Don't settle for less. Make the switch to Blackout Coffee. Head over to blackoutcoffee.com/MK or use the code MK for 20% off your first order. That's blackoutcoffee.com/MK. The code is MK. Join the movement. Taste the difference. Remember, with every sip, you are supporting a brand that stands for America. Be awake, not woke. I want to correct something. The Innocence Project, I think I screwed up my 2 cases. They're involved in the Scott Peterson case, not the Menendez case. Yeah, that makes more sense. I mean, we know they're not innocent. It's just a question of what level crime it was. murder or manslaughter. But Scott Peterson does have the Innocence Project now taking on his case. I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. But it's happening. Okay, so they're taking on, showed my conclusion. For those of you who are young, he is a disgusting pig who murdered his wife, Lacey, and their unborn son, Connor, who she was 8.5 months pregnant.
Megyn Kelly.
Wow.
I'm not objecting.
Megyn Kelly.
He's convicted. He killed his wife and his unborn son so he could shtook Amber Fry, who he lied to and told her he wasn't married. She was a heroine who came forward when she saw him all over the news as they were searching for his missing wife and said, what in the actual, this guy and I have been dating for 2 months. He told me he was unmarried. And then she wore a wire for the cops and we got all sorts of, he was at Lacey's memorial being like, Amber, I'm in Paris. You should see the fireworks. They're amazing. That's who Scott Peterson is. So he got convicted.
But what about the burglars? Megyn, the burglars. What about the burglars? What about the burglars? Megyn, there's
this
burglars.
Is what Scott Peterson's sister has been saying. The burglars were in the neighborhood and they allegedly also wanted to burgle Lacey or were seen burgling by Lacey and murdered her and just happened to drag her down to the same marina to which Scott took his newly purchased boat for the very first time. He needed to take it out on Christmas Eve and also had found like the castings for anchors, multiple anchors that were never found, like concrete anchors that might weigh down a body. And the burglars amazingly went to that very same marina, which was like an hour away, and dropped Lacey's newly murdered body in that same marina. And who knows why Scott actually wound up being at the same marina on the same day with the anchors disappearing. Okay, that's what's
Arthur
happening.
Could sell that. Arthur can make that happen.
Megyn, I know who it was.
Arthur.
Who was it?
You can make that happen.
It was the two burglars from Home Alone. It was the guys from Home Alone. He saw them trying to bring into Lou McAllister's house, and they kidnapped her in that van that they drove around with Joe Pesci. With the suit. And then they threw her in the water. That's who did.
Here's what's actually happening. He's been granted access to crucial evidence, reading from the Daily Mail, by a California judge in a bombshell ruling that could open the door to reevaluation of the case. He's now allowed a discovery period on the basis of this new law that gives discovery rights to defendants who are convicted of serious or violent felonies and sentenced to 15 or more years in jail. It allows him to access materials in possession of the prosecution and law enforcement authorities to which he would have been entitled at the time of trial. So somehow it casts a wider net on what he could get from the cops and the prosecutors, Mark. So does this, what does that tell us? Why is this bombshell?
It gives people hope, but Arthur and I were talking during the break. We both kind of think it's a reach. We don't think it's going to go anywhere. The police, for what it's worth, said it was completely unrelated, and they have their reasons why the burglary had nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance and subsequent murder. So, for those who want to see him out, the groupies, it gives them hope, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
They're claiming the whole thing with the burglars and that it wasn't properly investigated, Arthur.
On Christmas Eve, and they say basically the cops gave up on that theory too quickly, and they didn't really look and see who the burglars were and what their record was, and was there any violence in their past, and is that a real theory that she was kidnapped and then killed? It's thin, but as Mark said, probably the most it does is give 51-year-old Scott Peterson a glimmer of hope. And the Innocence Project doesn't just pick any case, though. They don't just sign up for anything, so they must smell a little something.
They're not always right. They're often wrong.
I know that
they're even more in the business of getting people out of jail than Gascon, and they take on their pet causes, and his sister's been everywhere trying to say he's innocent. Oh, what a shocker. His sister doesn't think he did it. Well, you're wrong, sister. I think he did do it. I think the jury got it right. Look at his behavior after the fact. He didn't even look for her. He couldn't have given two shits about his dead son who was 8.5 months in utero. Anyway, I'm convinced 100% this guy did it. And if I'm wrong, I'll admit it, but I won't be. I won't be, guys.
Megyn, it would really make you, I think it would make your show more watchable if you should express your opinions a little more. Come out of your shell, and you're really buttoned up and you're really folding close to the vest. Kardashian's coming over in a little while. If you want me, I'll get you on the phone.
Yeah, a lot more shy and meek over the years, I've noticed.
I gotta go. It's over between us. Goodbye. Love you guys. Bye, Martha. Okay, tomorrow, Glenn Greenwald. Don't miss that.